you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Have a seat. Just yourself up to the microphone. You don't have to talk directly into the microphone, but I need you to speak loud enough that the gentleman up there on the back row, far back row, can hear you, okay?
Yes, sir.
You understand you're now under oath and your answers are sworn answers subject to penalty of perjury.
Yes, sir.
All right, you may proceed.
Talk to the ladies and gentlemen.
David Whitehead.
And David, where are you currently employed?
I'm employed at the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory in Pearl, Mississippi.
And you're our first witness from the crime lab today, the forensics laboratory. So could you explain for the ladies and gentlemen what you guys do over there?
We provide forensic examinations to 8 law enforcement agencies in the state of Mississippi.
And what is your position at the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory?
I'm a forensic scientist as well as the section chief of the trace evidence section, the supervisor.
And what exactly does a section chief of trace evidence do?
We do items of trace evidence, gunshot residue, hair fibers, paints, glass, fire debris. We have probably $1.5 million worth of analytical equipment, as well as I'm the supervisor of that section responsible for the technical aspects of the trace evidence section.
And how long have you been employed there with the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory?
I've been with the laboratory since January of '94, so a little over 30 years.
Do you have any previous experience testifying as a forensic scientist and with a subspecialty of trace evidence?
Yes, ma'am. I've testified probably north of 400 times in circuit court in Mississippi, circuit court in Louisiana, as well as federal court in the state of Mississippi. As a matter of fact, I've testified here on several occasions.
And if you could give the ladies and gentlemen just a kind of background on what education you have and kind of how you got to be in this role.
Yes, ma'am. I hold degrees in chemistry and forensic science from the University of Mississippi. I've attended numerous schools and seminars over the years. I've been to the FBI Academy in Quantico, several different classes. I've been to McCrone Research Institute in Chicago. I'm certified by the American Board of Criminalistics after passing the national certification test in 1998. So my certification is in comprehensive criminalistics. I'm also a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the Southern Association of Forensic Scientists, and the American Society of Trace Evidence Examiners. And of course, our laboratory is an accredited laboratory. We're accredited by the organization called ANAB.
Your Honor, at this time we would move to have this witness tendered as an expert, as a forensic scientist with a specialty in trace evidence.
You wish the board out?
No, no objection to him as a witness or an expert witness.
Without objection, he'll be admitted as an expert witness in the field of forensic science with specialty in trace evidence. You may proceed.
Mr. Whitehead, if you could explain to us exactly what trace evidence is.
Trace evidence deals with small items of evidence, trace amounts. We analyze such things as I previously stated, hairs, textile fibers, paints, glass, gunshot residue, and in addition to that, fire debris type evidence where we're looking at charred debris for ignitables. We do a lot of comparison work where we're comparing unknown samples to known samples. But probably our biggest caseload is gunshot residue examinations. We probably get about 400 or 500 of those cases in a year. And our second most caseload is going to be fire debris.
And what is gunshot residue?
Gunshot residue is produced when a weapon is discharged, and what will happen is you'll get gases escaping any opening in the weapon. We're specifically looking for primer residue, which comes from the primer cup. So when the firing pin strikes in the weapon strikes the ammunition, the primer cup, it ignites those components. That ignites the gunpowder, which is what propels a projectile out the end of the barrel. You'll get these gases escaping any opening in the barrel. When it hits the cooler air outside the weapon, it'll condense into particles. These particles are microscopic in size. They contain lead, barium, and antimony, and they will have a spherical morphology.
And what type of testing, or can you describe for us how you test for gunshot residue?
We utilize what is called a scanning electron microscope with an energy dispersive X-ray analyzer. That's a fancy name for a large microscope that analyzes these tiny particles. Since they're about a micron in diameter, you have to have a pretty powerful instrument to look for these. The microscope actually visualizes the particles. The X-ray detector actually tells us the composition of those particles. And again, we're looking for lead, barium, and antimony particles. Those are what are produced from primer residue.
And I want to take just a step back. You mentioned earlier that the lab is accredited. Do you also undergo like performance testings on the machinery that you use?
We're accredited every 4 years, so every 4 years a team comes in and inspects all aspects of the organization, as well as we're proficiency tested every year. So every year we complete proficiency tests that are outside proficiency tests, and we to look for things like gunshot residue or the other disciplines.
And for people that are not familiar with those proficiency tests, is that like I would do my research or my testing, I would submit my report, and an outside agency would then review everything and make sure that that was proper?
Sort of like that. What we do is the outside agency will produce the proficiency test. They have an expected outcome of those tests, and the report will be issued after the report is published on what that proficiency test is. So there is an expected answer to those tests.
Excuse me for speaking over you, back in March of 2024 through currently, was your proficiency testing at the crime lab, and you're specifically up to date?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I just completed a GSR proficiency test.
Mr. Whitehead, did you have the opportunity to work on Mississippi Crime Lab case number 24003-524?
I did.
And who was the suspect in that case?
The suspect was listed as being a Carly Gregg.
And the work and the testing that you did on that case, was that also reviewed by anyone else?
It was. All of our casework is reviewed by a second examiner, and that particular examiner in this case was Jacob Birchfield.
And did he agree with the results of your findings?
He did.
What evidence did you review or did you receive in order to do your testing?
I received a gunshot residue evidence collection kit labeled as coming from Carly Gregg.
Permission to approach witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I handed you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 43. Have you seen that item before?
I have. This is a gunshot residue evidence collection kit. I can identify it by the crime lab case number, submission number on the barcode that was placed there by an evidence tech when it was received into the laboratory. I can also identify it by the green evidence seal that I placed after the analysis was complete with my initials and date across that seal.
And being that that is still sealed, does that appear to be in the same or similar condition as when you closed it?
It does.
And for what purpose did you review that piece of evidence?
This item of evidence was analyzed for the presence of gunshot residue.
And did you perform that testing to see if there was gunshot residue present? Did you prepare a report with your findings in that case?
Yes, ma'am.
Permission to approach the witness, Your Honor? Is that an accurate copy of your report?
Yes, ma'am. This is a copy of the certified report that I issued in this particular case.
And that contains your findings?
It does.
And it bears your signature?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, we'd ask that this be marked as the state's next exhibit.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Be admitted S51, all purposes.
If you would, Mr. Whitehead, if you could explain, I know you've talked about what gunshot residue is and that you tested that particular kit. If you could just walk us through the testing on this particular item and what your findings were.
Yes, ma'am. This particular kit contained 2 adhesive tape lifts labeled right hand and left hand. The adhesive tape lifts, the idea is if there's any residue on the surface of a person's hands, it will be picked up by the adhesive tape lift. Those samples were then placed into the scanning electron microscope and analyzed for the presence of gunshot residue, and I reported out the results of that analysis.
And what were the results in this case?
Particles of gunshot residue were positively identified on the right hand, labeled as coming from Carly Gregg's, and the left hand, labeled as coming from Carly Gregg's.
And based on your training and experience, is the results rendered reliable?
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
No questions of this witness, Your Honor.
All right, may this witness be finally excused by the state?
Yes, sir.
By the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you're free to go, Ms. Moore. The state may call its next witness.
State calls Nathan Hawley.
Nathan Holly.